Ned Stark stood by the tall window of the Tower of the Hand, staring down at the Red Keep with heavy eyes. The truth was a poison in his chest, a truth that could break the kingdom apart. Cersei Lannister's children were not the true heirs to the Iron Throne. They were not Robert's children. They were born of incest, the children of her and her brother Jaime. In the original tale, Ned gave Cersei a warning, a chance to flee with her children. But not this time. This time, he remembered the words of his wife, the pain in the north, and the growing power of the Lannisters. He chose duty. He chose justice. He summoned his most loyal guards, men from the north, not easily bought. "We ride to the Queen's chambers. Now," he said. Cersei was in her room, dressed in red and gold, sipping wine as if the world bowed to her. When Ned entered with his men, she stood with arrogance in her eyes. "You dare enter without permission," she hissed. "I have no time for your games," Ned said coldly. "You're under arrest for treason, and your children are no heirs to the throne." Shock cracked through her proud mask. "You wouldn't dare." "I do," he cut her off. His men stepped forward. Cersei screamed for her guards, but Ned had already taken control of the castle's inner hall. The city watch, paid by Littlefinger but still confused and undecided, watched from a distance. Ned had made his move quickly, before she could strike first. Cersei was dragged from her room, furious and screaming. Her youngest son, Tommen, cried. Myrcella clung to her hand. Nurstella clung to her hand. Joffrey, however, stood frozen, confused and angry. Ned ordered them to be held but treated well. "They are innocent children," he said, "even if their birth was a lie." That night, whispers flew through King's Landing like wildfire. The Queen imprisoned. The heir to the throne a bastard? Panic started to spread among the lords. Ned sent a raven to Stannis Baratheon, Robert's true heir. "Come to King's Landing," the letter said. "Your place is on the throne." But even as Ned tried to do the right thing, the city was not kind to men like him. Pettier Baelish, who had promised him support, now began plotting. He knew Ned had the truth, but he also knew truth didn't always win. In the dungeons, Cersei sat in silence. She was no longer shouting. She was thinking, planning. Hatred burned in her heart for Ned Stark, and Jaime, her brother and lover, was on his way back from the Riverlands. If he found out she was imprisoned, there would be blood. Above, Ned tried to keep the kingdom together. He didn't want war, he wanted order, but war was already coming. Tywin Lannister would not stay quiet while his daughter sat in chains. The Lannisters always paid their debts, and this one would be soaked in blood. The next morning the sun rose over King's Landing, but the air was tense. Nobles whispered in the corridors. Servants hurried with their heads down. The Queen was still locked in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, and Lord Eddard Stark, the Hand of the King, was preparing for a storm. King Robert had not returned from his hunting trip. Ned prayed he would come back alive. Without him, the city was a powder keg, and Ned knew that with Cersei imprisoned, her powerful family would not stay silent. Across the narrow sea of soldiers and spies in the capital, Varys the Spider slithered through secrets. He came to Ned in the small council chamber, as quiet as always. "You've made a bold move, Lord Stark," he said, folding his hands. "It was justice," Ned replied. "She committed treason. The realm deserves the truth." "Truth," Varys said softly, "has a cost, and the Lannisters do not pay with gold. They pay with war." Ned looked tired. "Then let them come. The North remembers." But even his voice carried doubt. He didn't want war. He had children in the city. His daughters, Arya and Sansa, were innocent. If war came, they would be caught in the flames. Later that day, Sir Barristan Selmy came to him. "Lord Stark," the old knight said, "I served 3 kings. This kingdom is on the edge. You have done what you thought was right, but now the city stirs with fear." Ned nodded. "Then we must act quickly." He gathered the small council and announced Cersei's crimes. Her children are not of royal blood. They are the spawn of incest between her and Sir Jaime Lannister. I have proof. The realm must know." Littlefinger smiled slightly, sipping wine, but said nothing. Renly Baratheon looked alarmed. "And who will rule?" he asked. "Stannis," Ned replied, "the true heir." Renly frowned. "Stannis has no love in the city. If you name him king, the streets may riot." "I will not support another lie," Ned said. "The law is clear." But already lines were being drawn. Renly disappeared the next night with Loras Tyrell heading south to gather men. Littlefinger vanished into his own web. Only a few still stood beside Ned. 3 days later, Robert returned from the hunt, wounded by a boar. He was dying, his skin pale, his voice weak. Ned stood beside his bed and held his hand. "I tried to be a good king," Robert whispered, "but I was never meant to rule. You do what I never could. Keep the realm safe, Ned." "I will, Your Grace," Ned said softly. "Rest now." Robert died at sunset. Bells rang through the city. The king was dead, but chaos rose quickly. Joffrey, still a boy but full of arrogance, tried to take the throne. The Iron Throne, however, stood empty. Ned had sent ravens to Stannis. He summoned the lords to hear the truth. Before the court, Ned stood with the king's will in hand and the truth in his voice. "Joffrey is not the king. His claim is false. Stannis Baratheon is the rightful ruler of the Seven Kingdoms." Gasps filled the hall. Some shouted, others stood frozen. Joffrey screamed in rage. "You lie! My mother told me your mother is a traitor," Ned said, cold and firm. Suddenly, the hall erupted. Gold cloaks pushed forward. Some moved toward Ned, others toward Joffrey. Steel was drawn. Confusion reigned. Then a horn sounded from the gates. Jaime Lannister had returned, and he had brought war to King's Landing. The gates of King's Landing thundered open as Jaime Lannister and 500 Lannister soldiers marched in. Their golden armor gleamed under the afternoon sun, and their banners waved proudly, a lion roaring against a red backdrop. The Kingslayer had returned, and his sister's imprisonment was a challenge he would not ignore. The city was split in fear. Half the gold cloaks stood uncertain, not knowing whether to obey the Hand or the Lannisters. Rumors filled every corner of Flea Bottom. Some claimed Ned Stark had already crowned Stannis. Others said Cersei had escaped the dungeons and cursed her enemies. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned stood by a table with Sir Barristan and Lord Commander Geo Mormont's raven perched near the window. Robb's letter had arrived from Winterfell. He was marching south with his bannermen. That brought comfort to Ned, but also worry. If war truly broke out, it would not stop at the gates of King's Landing. It would swallow the realm whole. A servant burst into the room, pale and breathless. "My lord Ser Jaime has taken the Red Keep's main hall. He demands an audience, or else." Ned's jaw tightened. "He came for blood," he said. "Then he'll get justice instead." He ordered 20 of his men, northern guards and trusted knights, to stand with him. Sansa was kept under watch, and Arya had already been sent away in secret with Syrio Forel toward the docks. She fought him on it, wild and furious, but Ned couldn't bear to risk her. "Survive, little wolf," he had told her. "Then come home." Ned entered the throne room with his men to find Jaime standing in front of the Iron Throne, arms crossed, Cersei's necklace wrapped tightly around his fingers like a promise of vengeance. "You have my sister in chains, Stark," Jaime said, his voice calm but sharp like a blade. "I suggest you fix that before the day is done." "You broke your oaths," Ned answered. "You and she both. I have the king's will and proof of her treason. This is justice." Jaime laughed bitterly. "Justice? You Starks talk of justice like it's a sword you can swing and be done with it. But justice in King's Landing is just another lie, like loyalty, like honor." Ned didn't flinch. "You killed the Mad King, Jaime. You know what madness on the throne looks like. You want your sister's bastard son to sit there and rule the realm?" Jaime stepped forward, fire in his eyes. "I want my family safe. I want my sister free. And I want you to get out of my way." A heavy silence fell between them. Then steel rang out. Jaime drew his sword and signaled his men. In an instant, chaos exploded in the throne room. Swords clashed, men screamed, and blood painted the marble floor. Ned fought like a Northman born of winter and war, cutting through two Lannister soldiers with precise strikes. Sir Barristan fought beside him, still swift despite his age, his white armor flashing. Jaime reached for Ned, swinging fast. Their swords met with a crash, and the throne loomed behind them like a shadow. "You should have run back to your cold castle," Jaime growled. "And you should have stayed in the Riverlands," Ned replied, parrying a vicious strike. But even as they fought, more Lannister soldiers poured into the hall. Ned's men began to fall, one by one. Sir Barristan was wounded, bleeding near the throne. Ned took a hard blow to the side, but stayed on his feet. It became clear they were outnumbered. Ned gave a shout, "Fall back!" He and his remaining guards pushed their way out of the hall. The gold cloaks stood aside, watching, uncertain whom to follow. Bloodied and breathless, Ned reached the corridor and slammed the door shut behind them. He had lost the throne room. Jaime had taken control. But Cersei was still in the dungeons, and Stannis was on his way. Robb was marching from the north, and deep inside the Red Keep, the game had changed. The lions were roaring now, but the wolf was not done. The Red Keep pulsed with tension. Blood still stained the throne room floor, and the Iron Throne stood crooked. Neither king nor conqueror sat upon it. Jaime Lannister had claimed the hall, but not the crown. And somewhere deep beneath the castle, his sister, Cersei, waited in chains, her silence more dangerous than 1,000 swords. Ned Stark stood in the Tower of the Hand, bruised and limping. Maester Pycelle stitched the wound on his side, while he kept one eye on the map before him. Lines of war were being drawn faster than he could erase them. "We hold the Queen," Ned said to Sir Barristan, who sat nearby with his arm in a sling. "That's our only peace now." Barristan nodded. "A dangerous one. Like a lioness with her cubs threatened, she'll rip through the bars when the time is right." Ned's eyes darkened. "Then we keep the bars strong." Outside the gates, the city buzzed like a nest of hornets. Gold cloaks were now split, half loyal to the crown, the others bribed or threatened by Lannisters. Jaime moved like wildfire, setting guards in place, claiming halls, speaking with lords in secret. But he didn't make one wrong move. He didn't storm the dungeons. He knew better, because Cersei had left him a message. "If I die in chains, burn the world." And Ned knew she meant it. That night Littlefinger came with his usual smirk. "You've caused quite the storm, Lord Stark. Even the rats are climbing the walls." "I have no time for riddles," Ned growled. Littlefinger leaned in, voice smooth. "Then here's something direct. Release the Queen. Let Joffrey sit the throne. Take your daughters and leave for Winterfell. Peace. Isn't that what you want?" Ned stood. "Peace built on lies never lasts." Pettier chuckled. "Neither does truth. And yet here you are, bleeding for it." Before he could answer, a raven arrived from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon had responded. "I accept the truth. I march with 20,000 men. I claim my birthright. Tell the realm to prepare." Ned showed the letter to Sir Barristan and Varys. "We declare Stannis king by sunrise." Varys sighed, his soft voice barely above a whisper. "Then the city will burn by nightfall." At dawn, ravens flew from the rookery, carrying Ned's seal to every corner of the 7 kingdoms. "Stannis Baratheon is the true king. Joffrey Baratheon is a bastard born of incest. Let the realm choose honor." When the proclamation reached the throne room, Jaime nearly tore it apart with his bare hands. "He's lost his mind!" Jaime barked. "He's going to start a war. He can't win." He turned to the Lord Commander of the City Watch. "Double the guards, block the gates, And if Ned Stark makes another move, kill him. But even as Jaime planned, his fury boiling, a deeper fear sat in his heart. Cersei. She had been silent too long. What was she planning? What poison was she mixing in the dark? He visited her that night. Deep in the dungeon, Cersei sat in shadow, her gown torn, her face pale but defiant. She smiled as Jaime entered. "I thought you'd come sooner," she said. "I had to fight through a city of cowards and traitors," he answered. "I'll get you out." Cersei leaned forward. "Not yet." Jaime frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want them to believe they've won. Let the Northman write his letters. Let the people cheer for Stannis. Then we break them." Jaime stared at her, realizing her madness wasn't just anger. It was cold, calculated fury. "I want the wolf humbled," she whispered. "I want him to beg before he dies." Above the dungeon, Ned stood in the great hall, preparing to summon the lords. By this time tomorrow, Stannis' banner will fly over this castle. But he didn't know that somewhere in the shadows, Littlefinger had switched sides once again, that whispers had reached Tywin Lannister, that gold and swords were already moving, and far away, in the Riverlands, a message had reached Robb Stark. "Your father has declared war. March now, or lose him forever." The war of lions and wolves had truly begun. In the heart of the North, at Winterfell, Robb Stark stood before a long table covered in maps and scrolls, his fingers clenched around the letter from King's Landing. His eyes scanned the words again, though he already knew them by heart. "Your father has declared Stannis as king. Jaime Lannister holds the throne room. The queen is in chains. War is coming." Robb looked to his bannermen, Great John Umber, Roose Bolton, and Rickard Karstark among them. The hall was cold, even for Winterfell, but the air burned with rage. "They've taken the capital," Robb said, "and my father bleeds for it. We ride now, or we lose him." The North roared its answer. 2 days later, 20,000 northern soldiers marched toward the Neck, joined by lords from the Riverlands. Catelyn Stark rode with her son, her face stern, her heart pounding with both pride and dread. War was here, and the cost would be heavy. Back in King's Landing, Ned was trying to hold what little power he had left. The Raven from Dragonstone had changed everything. With the truth in the open, the city teetered on the edge of revolt. Crowds gathered in the streets, shouting about the false prince and the rightful king. Gold cloaks had begun beating anyone who even whispered Stannis' name. Jaime had placed spies in every corner, and the Red Keep felt more like a prison than a palace. Ned moved carefully now. His guards were fewer. His allies were silent. Even Ser Barristan had grown quiet, nursing his wounds in solitude. Still, Ned visited Cersei each morning. She no longer cursed him. She didn't scream. She only smiled, a cold, eerie smile that never reached her eyes. "You think you've won," she told him once, "but the game isn't over. You're still playing by rules, and rules don't matter when the whole board burns." Ned ignored her, but her words stayed with him. That night, he met with Varys again in the Godswood. The spider spoke softly beneath the weirwood tree. "The city is shifting, Lord Stark. You may hold truth, but Jaime holds the throne, and your northern army is still a week away." "Then I must hold," Ned said, "just long enough." But Varys stepped closer, his voice lower now. "There is something else, something darker. Cersei has hidden a secret. Something even I missed. Her silence, it's not surrender, it's strategy." Ned narrowed his eyes. "What secret?" "I don't know yet," Varys admitted, "but I feel it coming, like a storm just beyond the wall." And Varys was right. 3 days later, on a quiet morning, a massive explosion rocked the east wing of the Red Keep. Smoke filled the sky. Screams echoed down the halls. Ned rushed toward the sound, sword in hand, fearing an assassination. What he found instead was worse. The dungeon doors had been blown open. Cersei was gone. Dozens of guards lay dead, throats slit, all burned. One of Ned's own northern men was missing, likely bribed or blackmailed. The escape had been brutal and fast. "She's free," Sir Barristan muttered. "7 hells, she's free." Ned's heart sank. "Jaime?" Barristan shook his head. "He didn't plan it. I can see it in his face. He's just as shocked." But Jaime wasn't shocked for long. By nightfall, the city had changed. Cersei stood beside her son Joffrey in the throne room, his crown gleaming, his face twisted in a cruel smile. Her chains were gone. Her red gown flowed like fire. The Lannister soldiers filled every corridor, every wall, every gate. Joffrey pointed at the throne. "Bring me Lord Stark." And so they came for him. But Ned Stark did not run. He stood in the Godswood, the wind in his hair, his hand on his sword, waiting. He had chosen truth, and he would not bend. But he wasn't alone, because that night, as the city braced for bloodshed, a raven arrived. A message to Cersei, a warning. "Robb Stark is at the gates." The wolf had arrived. By the time Robb Stark reached the outskirts of King's Landing, the sky was dark with smoke and tension. His banner-grayed direwolf on white flew high among a forest of spears and northern steel. Behind him, 20,000 men stood ready to die, their breath fogging in the cold morning air. Robb was only a boy in the eyes of many, but his jaw was set like stone. He had come for his father, and he wasn't leaving without him. Inside the Red Keep, chaos whispered through every hall. Cersei, once caged like a lioness, now sat comfortably beside the Iron Throne, her eyes burning with vengeance. Joffrey sat on the throne itself, legs swinging, golden crown too big for his head, barking orders like a mad pup pretending to be king. "They think they can threaten us," Cersei hissed, pacing. "The boy brought a northern army to my gate. Let him. Let them all come. We still hold the throne, the city, and the game." But Jaime's mood was different. He leaned against a pillar, staring at the floor. "You think you control this," he said quietly. "But I saw the Northmen. I saw what they did at the Twins, what they did in the Riverlands. They don't fight for gold. They fight for blood." Cersei turned on him. "So what would you have me do? Kneel to wolves? Let the bastard son of Eddard Stark sit on the throne while our name is dragged through the mud?" Jaime didn't answer. He was tired. He'd seen too much war, too much death, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure they were going to win. Outside the walls, Robb sent a raven with one message: "Release Lord Eddard Stark, or we take the city." Cersei read it with a smirk and tossed it into the fire. That night, Robb met with his commanders under a quiet tent. Catelyn stood beside him, her eyes full of steel and sorrow. "They won't give him up easily," she said. "Cersei will make this personal." "She already has," Robb said. "But we're not here for politics. We're here for my father." The Greyjohn growled beside him. "Then let's breach the walls and take the bitch's head." But Roose Bolton, quiet and pale, spoke next. "We must be careful. There are innocents in the city. The Lannisters will use them as shields." Robb's hand clenched the hilt of his sword. "Then we fight smart. We find a way in. We don't slaughter small folk, but we don't stop until the Red Keep falls." Back in the city, Varys moved like a shadow, slipping through secret tunnels and hidden doors. He came to Ned that night, finding him under armed guard in a small stone chamber. "They're planning something," Varys whispered. "The Queen has spies among your men. She's trying to lure Robb into a trap, maybe a false surrender." Ned, bruised and tired, sat against the cold wall. "I raised Robb better than that." "You may have," Varys said, "but this city is a snake pit, and your son walks barefoot into its mouth." The next morning, the city gates opened. 2 white banners were raised, high signs of Parley. Cersei, draped in regal red, rode out with Joffrey and 100 guards. Across the field, Robb waited with his bannermen and his mother at his side. Between them, a long stretch of silence. Cersei halted and smiled coldly. "You bring an army to my gates, boy. Robb didn't blink. "You have my father. And if I do?" Cersei raised an eyebrow. "You'll burn the city." "I'll take it," Robb said. "One wall at a time." Cersei laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So much like your father, honor and fury in equal measure." Then she pulled something from her sleeve. A letter, stamped with the Lion of Lannister. "You want peace? I'll give you a choice. You bend the knee to King Joffrey and your father lives. He'll be released, sent north. You get him back. No war." Robb stared at her. "And if I say no?" She smiled wider. "Then he dies, and you can collect what's left." The wind went still. Catelyn gasped, grabbing Robb's arm. The lords began to shout, but Robb raised a hand, silencing them. His voice was cold. "You've made your move. Now make sure you're ready for mine." He turned his horse. "Prepare the siege engines," he told his men. The parley was over, and the war had truly begun. The sun never truly rose over King's Landing that morning. Dark clouds gathered above the city, thick and low, as if the gods themselves were watching. On the hills beyond the Blackwater, Robb Stark's army moved like a sea of grey and steel. Siege towers were dragged into place. Flaming pitch barrels were lined up. Archers stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the walls of the Red Keep. But inside the city, behind those towering walls, madness was taking root. Cersei watched from a balcony, sipping wine that trembled in her hand. She had expected Robb to hesitate, to break under the weight of her threat, but he hadn't. The boy had turned his back on mercy, just like she had years ago when she chose Jaime over her husband. Now 2 lions and a wolf stood at the edge of destruction. "They're not bluffing," Jaime said behind her, armored and ready. "If you kill Ned Stark, you lose all leverage." "I lose a bargaining chip," Cersei said calmly, though her voice cracked just to the... "Not leverage. I still have the throne. I still have the city, and I still have his daughters." Jaime turned sharply. "Sansa is a child. Arya's gone. Then one is enough," she snapped. "If I hang Stark from the gates and chain his daughter beside him, the North will break." Jaime stared at her, horrified. "That's not strategy. That's madness." Cersei met his gaze with cold fire. "They called our children bastards. They threw me in a dungeon like a common thief. Don't you dare speak to me of mercy now." In the dungeons, Ned Stark sat in silence, his chains heavy, his body aching. He had heard the city tremble. He knew his son was outside. And he knew Cersei would use any weapon she had, even Sansa. When Varys came again through the tunnel, Ned didn't bother asking about the war. He asked only one question: "Is my daughter safe?" Varys nodded. "Arya is gone. Sansa is still in the lion's den." Ned closed his eyes. "Then this ends with fire and blood." That night, under a moonless sky, the first assault began. Robb Stark gave the command, and the wolves howled. Catapults hurled stones against the gates. Flaming arrows rained down from the hills, lighting up the battlements. Northern soldiers surged toward the walls with shields raised, climbing ladders, while Lannister archers fired from above. Screams filled the air, metal clashing, blood painting the stone. The city was no longer watching, it was drowning. Inside the keep, chaos spread. Gold cloaks fought among themselves. Some defected, opening inner gates to northern scouts. Others stood their ground, defending the queen, fearing her more than the enemy. Cersei stood in the throne room, wine in hand, Joffrey beside her. He was shaking, pale and useless. "I don't want to die," he muttered. "You won't," she said coldly, stroking his golden hair. "Not if I still have breath in me." Down in the dungeon, Sir Eileen Payne stood before Ned Stark, sword in hand, waiting for the Queen's word. "She wants you dead," he said simply. Ned raised his head. "Then tell her to come do it herself." But the door burst open before the blade fell. Arya Stark, covered in dust and dressed as a stable boy, slipped in like a shadow behind Varys. Her face was fierce, her small hands gripping needle. "Father," she whispered. Ned's eyes went wide. "Arya?" Before anyone could speak, the tower shook. A loud explosion echoed through the keep. The main gate had fallen. Robb's army was inside the city. Jaime, leading a last desperate charge, fought like a demon. Northern soldiers flooded the streets. Fire climbed the walls. Bells rang, not for victory, but for death. In the throne room, Cersei screamed for the guards, but most had already fled. Joffrey sobbed, crown in his lap. Robb Stark kicked open the doors, sword in hand, blood on his armor. "Where is my father?" Cersei turned, eyes wild. "He dies before he reaches you." But Robb raised his hand, and from behind him, Theon Greyjoy appeared, dragging a bloodied Ser Island Pain, and behind him Arya, and then, stepping forward, weak but unbroken, Eddard Stark. The room fell to silence. Cersei backed away, her world collapsing. "You lost," Ned said, voice like winter. And for the first time, Cersei Lannister had nothing left to say. The Iron Throne loomed in the silence like a curse cast in steel, its blades twisted and cruel, just like the lies that had kept Cersei Lannister in power. But now her lies were crumbling around her like the city she once ruled. Ned Stark stepped into the throne room, slow but proud, chains still hanging from his wrists. Blood streaked his brow, but his eyes, those northern eyes, burned clear. Behind him, Arya stood with needle drawn, a wolf in girl's skin, and beside them, Robb Stark, young, furious, and covered in soot, pointed his sword at the queen. "Yield," Robb growled. Cersei stood beside Joffrey, her crimson gown torn at the sleeve, her fingers twitching at the dagger hidden in her belt. Her golden lion hair was messy, but her voice was still sharp. "I am the queen," she hissed. "I will not kneel to a boy playing war." Robb stepped forward. "You're not a queen. You're a usurper, a liar, and a traitor. You lost the war. Drop your blade." She smirked. "You think you're different from me. You came here with swords and fire. You tore through a city just to get your father back. You think that makes you better?" Ned's voice rang out, low and steady. "I did what was right. You did what served you. I did what I had to." Cersei snapped, her mask cracking. "Robert never loved me. He beat me, humiliated me. You Northerners speak of honor like it feeds children. But power that's real, power keeps you alive. And now," Ned said quietly, "it buries you." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Cersei lunged. Faster than expected, she reached for her dagger and thrust it toward Joffrey's chest, not out of hatred, but to take control of the moment. A mother's twisted mercy. If her son couldn't rule, no one would, but Arya was faster. She moved like wind, needle flashing forward, and steel met flesh. Cersei fell, gasping, the dagger slipping from her hand, blood blooming across her ribs. "No!" Joffrey shrieked, dropping to his knees beside her. Ned grabbed Arya and pulled her back, shielding her from the dying queen's final breath. Cersei stared at the throne one last time, then at Ned. "You think this ends with me?" she whispered. "We are lions. We always return." Then she was gone. Joffrey screamed, lunging at Robb, but Theon tackled him before he could strike. The boy king thrashed like a caged animal, spitting and sobbing. "You killed her! I'm the king! I'm the Dom!" Robb punched him hard across the face, and silence returned. Later that night, the Iron Throne stood empty. The fires across the city were being put out. Bodies lined the streets, but the people were not screaming. They were watching, waiting. In the great hall, banners of the direwolf hung beside the Stag, Stark and Baratheon, united in truth at last. Maester Luwin, brought down from Winterfell, stood before a crowd of lords and small folk, reading Ned Stark's scroll aloud. By blood and law, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne is Stannis Baratheon. Until his arrival, Eddard Stark shall serve as protector of the realm. The false King Joffrey Baratheon is hereby removed from all claim to the throne. A murmur rippled through the hall. Ned sat at the front, tired but unbent, Arya by his side. Sansa, freed from her chambers, clung to her father's arm, eyes wide and broken but healing. Catelyn stood behind Robb, her face unreadable. "I never wanted this," Ned said quietly. "I only wanted justice." Sir Barristan stepped forward and knelt. "And you've given it, my lord." Others followed. Davos Seaworth arrived with the first Baratheon ships. Lords from the Reach and Dawn. Even some of the gold cloaks who had once served the Lannisters now bent the knee. The war was not over. Stannis still had to claim his throne, but King's Landing had changed. The game had changed. The dungeons, Joffrey was locked in chains, wailing threats no one believed anymore. And in the throne room, as the sun finally broke through the smoke and cast its light on the Iron Throne, Eddard Stark stood before it, not as a king, but as a man who had survived the worst of men. He turned his back on the throne and walked away, because some thrones weren't worth the blood that built them, and for once in the South, honor had won.